Hi everyone, and thanks for joining this webinar, part of our International Virtual Jobs Fair series. I'm Senior Editor here at TES, and today I'm joined by a fantastic panel of teachers and leaders as we look at the issue of diversity in the international sector. If you're moving to an international school for the first time, you probably have a ton of questions regarding your new school, the country, many of which I'm sure your head or Google might be able to answer. But when it comes to issues of diversity, I think the questions get a little bit more complex and maybe the answers are a little bit harder to find. So we've brought a panel of people here today who hopefully can answer some of those questions. I'll just go around the table and introduce everyone. I'm joined by Natalie Cole, who's an English and drama teacher at the British School in the Netherlands. That's in The Hague. Hi, Natalie.
Hello, hi.
I've also got Tushi Gracia, who's head teacher at Hendon Prep School in London.
Hi.
Hi. I've got Stephen Sharma here, who's head of primary at Regent's International School in Pattaya in Thailand.
Hi, everybody.
And I've got Donald Cleary, who's head of English at the International Academy in Amman. Hi, Donald.
Hi.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining me today. I'll dive straight in with a question for Natalie, if that's okay. So, what's your experience been like as a sort of Black applicant in the international sector, and your first sort of experiences as a new teacher?
On the whole, it's been pretty positive, to be fair. I think that's kind of the fear when you first start applying to jobs like this, what it's going to be like. However, especially working in the Middle East, I found it actually quite okay in regards to being a Black female in the Middle East. To be fair, they see you more as British than just being Black.
Right.
When you're in the UK, you're kind of more from a Caribbean background, so people usually refer to me as being Black Caribbean. But actually, when you're in the Middle East, it's more of a case of you're Black British, and even the Black part isn't. I didn't feel it as much. I felt the British part more. So it didn't feel as extreme as I thought it would be, because I think you're around so many different cultures anyway, especially in the Middle East. I think you kind of don't feel as kind of the odd one out as much, I would say. So it was definitely less worrying than I thought when I first started applying for the international scene, for sure.
Okay, great. Donald, for you, in terms of sort of when you look at a new school from a sort of candidate perspective, and you perhaps look at a country, what sort of process do you go through as someone from a BAME background, and kind of what are the questions you tend to ask?
To be honest, I think especially if you're new, at least from thinking back to when I first entered into international teaching, I wasn't very skeptical that much. I was trying to apply as much as I could to give myself more opportunity to be looked at. So I think my first recommendation to someone who's applying new is to be less selective, give themselves more options. I mean, apply to more schools. Because the most important thing, I think, is to get your feet wet first, to actually get that first school under your belt. Because I think once you have that first school, more schools and better schools will be more likely to look at you. But there's always a skepticism initially as to, can you survive internationally? Can you survive away from home? I think that's probably that's something that schools actually look at when you're a new applicant. So I think being a little less picky is probably what I'd say to someone who's applying for the first time.
Okay, so Stephen, I think everyone here would agree that there's probably a few myths and misconceptions around the international sector in a lot of, in lots of different conversations, but perhaps around diversity in particular, there's a bit of a stereotype that perhaps these sorts of schools are a bit like the sort of stuffy English boarding schools of like 50 odd years ago, and there's a bit of a stigma. Do you see that in your role and how you've worked, or do you think that's outdated?
I've got to say, from my experience, I've having worked in Middle East for 10 years and now in Thailand, that's a huge myth. And if we can do something about busting that myth today, then it'll be a really good move. The international scene is very much an open space, and it's very much an international space where differences are distinctly celebrated and distinctly welcome, if I could say that. And I think looking back to when I applied, and I know Donald mentioned it earlier on, that the first time I applied, first and foremost in my mind was applying, and that was it. And it was looking at lots of different schools, looking at the student body, and looking at how many different nationalities were in a student body. So the first school I worked at had 72 different nationalities. And when I arrived, I worked with teachers who are from the local area. So from the UAE, from Lebanon, from Jordan, from India, Pakistan, New Zealand, Australia. We had a whole range of teachers from different backgrounds. And in terms of it being a stuffy, old-fashioned, the old British prep schools and private schools, it certainly is not. It's very much a forward-facing, forward-thinking, and very much future-embracing kind of environment. And if you're up for that kind of a change in how you want to see yourself in education, then the international scene is definitely for you.
Do you see sort of parents kind of pushing for that a bit more now? And they expect, if they're sending their kids to work, hopefully go to sort of another part of the world to get a degree and things, they want people from different cultures with different experiences. Is that what you're starting to see?
We are certainly seeing that in terms of my personal experience of working in the schools I worked at, that parents opting into an international education for their children. Parents who can send their children overseas in a number of different settings, choosing to come and live and have a family base in one country, while one or the other parent commutes back and forth from their home country, because the preference is for children to be around lots of different nationalities and learn how to work in a culturally very varied space. And it's certainly something that parents in my settings have valued, and it certainly is a big selling point for the schools as well.
Great. Tushi, since beginning your career as an international teacher, have you seen the sector change in your experience in terms of diversity? What have you seen?
I have. I agree with Stephen. I've been a teacher for over 27 years now, and definitely there has been a shift, I think, in the international sector opening up, becoming more diverse, more inclusive. I think that the international sector has really understood the benefits of having a more diverse community in its staffing, which reflects its pupils as well. So yes, I feel there has been a real positive shift over the last 30 odd years.
Great. Natalie, as sort of maybe a more recent new candidate, at least. Sorry, guys. What were your main concerns when you first started to apply sort of outside of your home country, the UK?
Well, I'm from London, so I'm, it's where it's very diverse. So I think that was one of my main fears, is kind of being the only Black person at these kind of schools. And to be fair, I still am. So I know that they're trying to make change, but there is still a problem in my eyes. And I think that, especially since last year and the kind of, George Floyd thing that happened, I think there has been obviously more of a drive for schools to want to take on more diverse staff, especially internationally. And I know that particularly at the school I'm at, it's this idea of, well, what can it take to get more diverse candidates in, because actually sometimes they don't apply. And so I think that's kind of the battle that I think some international schools are having, is the fact that they're just not applying. And so I think it's that kind of, again, I knew from a young age I wanted to go into the international teaching game, but I know that for a lot of maybe Black or Asian teachers, it's that fear, it's the possibility of maybe experiencing racism in the countries that you go to, because that's something I always look up or talk to people in that country who are already teaching there. That's something I ask, because that's obviously a fear that you experience, especially coming from London. Something as well, another main concern was, again, not having family or that support network. around you. I think that's initially can be quite scary, especially when I moved alone to Bahrain, and so that was quite nerve-wracking to not have that support network. But you do make friends really quickly, and people will kind of take you into their group, and you become a family of your own over there. So I think that's quite nice, that because you're all in the same boat, you all kind of do connect regardless of your ethnic background. But as people who've worked in Middle East, you have so many different types of friends from different backgrounds. So actually you kind of bring all your cultures together, which is quite nice. And yeah, I think also concern is getting used to the cultural differences. I think especially when you go to Middle East, it is very different to, British culture. And so it's being able to kind of adapt and be respectful and those kind of things in regards to, living in an Islamic country. But to be fair, I like that. And they're very open for you to ask questions when you don't understand something. I think that's the thing about it, is being open and being not afraid to ask when you are struggling or you don't understand something, because people are very willing and very open to share that with you and help you along the journey. So
great. So Natalie moved as an individual, a single. Stephen, you
yes.
have,
Sorry. Yes, I did.
Yeah, I'm just checking that's right. But Stephen, you've made a move with family. I'm right in thinking. How does that differ, do you think? And what were you thinking, and what were your first experiences like?
So we moved initially when I had one child. So I had one daughter. I was 3 years old when we moved to the Middle East. And what we were looking for was just, as we talked about earlier on, a very international feel, a very an open education, if you will, an opportunity to learn about other cultures. And when we moved looking at the country itself. So I know that Natalie's just mentioned about looking at the actual country that you're moving to and the features you look for. So we looked for what the school can offer beyond the classroom. So what opportunities are there for children that extend beyond the great facilities, the pools, everything else? What else is there? So looked at trips overseas, looked at residential trips for children. We also looked at what else I can get and what else I can do regionally. So Dubai being a hub centrally for flights means that a trip to, for example, local countries like Sri Lanka, Tanzania, they're all quite doable, and Natalie's laughing because actually you can get there quite quickly.
It's much cheaper.
It opens up a travel beyond European travel, which we'd already done as a family, and different experiences, cultural experiences in those countries, which are vastly different from our own back in the UK. And we looked at where there's growth as well, where there's potential for movement professionally, and where there are a number of other international schools. And we also looked at different companies, like big global companies that were particularly in the area in terms of education, and the possibility of moving, as Donald mentioned earlier on, starting at one school and then looking around and seeing what other opportunities there are. So those were the key factors for us.
Great. Donald, Natalie mentioned earlier the events of last year and George Floyd and Black Lives Matter protests. Does that feel like it's been a bit of caused a step change in the way that schools handle their application process and perhaps their attitudes to getting more diverse candidates, do you think?
I'd like to think so, yes. I'd say before, at least speaking personally, I've never gotten a job before March, April. That's usually when I get my jobs. And I'm always of the feeling that maybe my CV is revisited after the fact, I think, after that early pool of candidates. But this year I'm changing schools. I'm moving to Qatar, probably trying to get to see the World Cup. Again, another reason why you move to places, right? So I'm going to be actually right in the World Cup city. But the point I'm making is this year, I got looks much earlier. I got looks in November and December where normally I probably wouldn't have. And I think part of that is the recent movement to remove pictures from applications. I think that is giving a lot of people, the person from diverse background, an honest look. And I think I got an honest look this time around because I think I'm, as you know, pretty reasonably qualified, especially, you know, being on the international scene for 12 years. And I think probably the fact that pictures were removed, I think I got an honest look this time around where I got, you know, quite a few interviews in November and December where I'm usually starting to pick up in February and March. I'm usually fine, but, you know, I'm saying, you know, I haven't picked up a job February, March, I'm still okay. You know, April, I'm still probably okay. But this time around, you know, so I think, you know, piggybacking on Natalie's point, I think, yeah, I think that might have been a difference because a lot of agencies have removed pictures. And I think that probably was one thing that would have been a stumbling block in terms of diverse hiring. But that said, I think a lot of schools deliberately hire diversity as well. I think there are some schools out there that deliberately look for diverse hires. I remember when I went to Muscat, I was hired because I was a Jamaican. My director deliberately said, listen, we want more nationalities. So, you know, you are qualified as the other person, but you are a Jamaican. You bring something different to our school community. So I think despite that, there have always been schools that hire diversely. I think a lot more schools might be making that shift now. And I think removing pictures has made schools sort of look blindly at candidates, which again would increase diversity.
Right. Tushi, you're part of the Cognita group, I think I'm right in saying. And then have you seen these types of initiatives or other initiatives aimed at getting a more diverse group of candidates?
Yes, definitely. So like you say, I work for the Cognita schools group, and we've got 82 schools across 11 countries, Asia, Europe, the Middle East, Latin America. And one of the underpins of Cognita education is the nurturing of a global perspective, along with academic excellence and character development. And from the exec down, it is an underpin of you know, that we want to increase diversity. We want to make sure we really believe in well-being, and part of well-being is making sure that there is representation and that there is diversity and inclusion, and that's at all levels throughout the group. So at school level, we regularly review our curriculums to make sure they are more inclusive. We have done podcasts challenging, opening up conversations amongst our staff body to discuss the importance of encouraging diversity. We've done lots of work on unconscious bias, on the curriculum, on, you know, lots of different aspects of promoting and encouraging a diverse and representative staff body, really. Yeah, brilliant. It's important to us.
Good. Okay, so I've heard a little bit about your experiences. We'll go back to thinking about the audience here and the candidates out there who are probably nervously sort of scanning the jobs pages at the moment. Like, Natalie, have you got any sort of top tips for people out there looking for work at the moment who from a sort of BAME background, perhaps?
Yeah, just do your research. As Donald was saying towards the beginning, you may have your heart set on a country that you want to go to. I never thought I would go to Bahrain. I don't think I even heard of the place before I considered it. But actually, I didn't want to go to Dubai, and I was asking a lot of teachers kind of on social media. So Twitter's quite good for things like this. And I connected with a teacher who had worked in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and asked them what it was like to teach in the UAE. And then she actually suggested applying for her school in Bahrain, and she explained, you know, more to me about the country and things like that. And then, yeah, and that's the reason I went there. But because of being able to talk to someone who's actually there, you can get a better feel of the place rather than just what you see on the website or you see on Google, because you get the lived experiences of people who actually are teaching and working there. So that's definitely something to do. Also, I would say also look at things like the benefits you get with the school. That can obviously differ depending on the school you're going to. When I was in the Middle East, I had my medical and housing as part of my contract. So you can, I think looking at that as well is something you may consider, as well as kind of your wage compared to the living wage of the country. And so you work out, actually, are you saving or losing money in regards to that move? I think that's actually quite important as well, because I think when you go internationally, you do want to save, especially when you are in kind of UAE and Middle East, where you have the opportunity to do that. So I think that's something definitely to look at. And the last thing I would say is, don't let other people project their fears on you. I think that was my biggest thing. When I said to friends and family, I'm moving to the Middle East, it was like, oh, why do you want to move there? Oh, it's terrorism, it's this, it's that. And actually, I'm like, have you been there? And they're like, no, but what I've heard. And that can make you doubt yourself. And I think actually it's about just following through with what you want and not actually taking on board people who haven't actually experienced it themselves to make you make the judgment of what you should do. So I think that's definitely, write down the pros and cons, write down notes about each country you want to go to, be open, but yeah, don't let other people project their fears. I think that almost stopped me from going. And actually, I'm glad I didn't listen to them. Love them, but
Donald, I know you're quite an advocate of having a bit of a network of people working in different countries, and Natalie sort of touched on being able to speak to people who've been to those countries. What other advice would you give to candidates starting their international journey?
I don't think there's much I can say after Natalie, because she actually hit everything on the head, really. Well, let me see if I can figure something that Natalie didn't say. Well, the networks really come after you've really, branched out. But in addition to what Natalie says, there are also Facebook groups out there that you can actually use. But probably the only thing I would say is quality of life is not just about money. So yes, you do want to save money. Yes, I get it, because that's why we do this. But you could look at other continents or other spaces where you can actually have a wonderful quality of life. You may not be making that much money, but the cost of living is so low that you could still be saving and still be having a lot of fun living life. For example, I went to El Salvador, and moving from Muscat to El Salvador, you would consider a downgrade in terms of salary, but technically I wasn't saving that much less, even though I earned significantly less, because the quality of life in El Salvador, or the cost of living rather in El Salvador, is so much cheaper that I was spending a lot less to do pretty much the same things I would have done in Amman or here in Jordan as well. So there are those ways you can look at it. A friend of mine said you can't save unless you earn, but if you're not spending, you're still saving, if I'm making sense. And then Latin America as a space, it's so much fun. It's, you're constantly having fun. So if you're that type of person as well, where you want to have fun, Latin America is a place to be. And layer that as well with things like the geographical experience. If you're living in Central America, you can literally, I've gone to trips to volcanoes in Guatemala where I'm roasting marshmallows in the volcano and eating roasted marshmallows straight from the volcano, or watching Mount Fuego blast off behind me. So there are other things to look for as well. But I go back to my original point. I don't think you should be too selective if you're going out for the first time. Yes, you have your preferences. Yes, you want to go places, but it's better to apply and see what you get, and then you're in a position to start saying, okay, why would I choose X country over Y country? And then that's when you use your network. That's when you reach out to people and trying to find out what's the best place, like what Natalie did, trying to find out, what's life like here versus there. And that's probably more useful. But initially, I think just apply, see what you get first.
Great. I can feel a flurry of applications to Latin America coming on after that. Tishi, what about you? Have you got any advice for candidates?
My only advice is, following Natalie and Donald, is really just, seize the day. You learn. It's such a great experience working abroad. The learning is invaluable. If you do come back to the UK, you'll bring a wealth of knowledge and learning back that can be shared, and is really unique to the school that you're going to be, you know, bringing all of that learning back to. So, you know, absolutely, you know, seize the day on that. And I would echo, talk to colleagues in education who are working abroad, because they can allay any of the anxieties or any of the worries much easier than somebody who's here in the UK and hasn't worked abroad. It's just far better to reach out to people who have had that international experience. Yeah.
Great. Stephen, something to finish with? You can try and give Thailand a bit of a shout out, a la Donald, if you like.
I think Asia itself, Donald, I think it'll give you a run for your money in terms of having fun in Asia. I think I would echo what everyone said in terms of just it's taking a risk, you know, willing to step out and do something different to the norm, step away from the flock a little bit and think, I might try something in a different country, in a different continent. Touching on what Tushi said earlier on, when you are looking for a company or a school, look for a company or a school that are investing in and celebrating diversity. So I work for Nord Anglia, and we're looking, and we've created a global equity program and an equality program, which is looking at diversity, inclusion, and every school has an equality, diversity, and inclusion champion. And it goes aligned perfectly with what we're talking about today, which is busting those myths. International education is for everybody, and when you are looking internationally, look at the school that's going to invest in you as well. So ultimately, as we are all transient in international education, at one point you may leave the school, and it is worth thinking about when you leave the school, how much better will you be as a professional, and how much will you have benefited from a positive professional change? Is that school investing in you, and what systems and processes do they have? So we have a system called Nord Anglia University, and it's an online platform as well as a range of leadership programs. It's worthwhile before people start jumping in with application thinking, is it an independent school I want to apply to? Is it a group of schools? Is it a particular area that I'm interested in? I suppose the only tip I would give is think about what you really want to get out of your experience. I think that if I say that, then you know people can make their own minds about what it is that they're looking for.
Definitely, yeah. That's a nice point to finish on, I think. Thank you everyone for joining me today. That was really insightful. Really great to get all your different experiences and loads of positives there. So thank you very much. And yeah, thanks to everyone who's tuned in, and enjoy the rest of the conference this weekend. Thanks everyone.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thanks guys.
Cheers guys.
Bye.